glad to be here. Pastor asked me to fill in while he and Lori are away, so that's great. And we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 31 this evening. And Proverbs chapter 31. And before we get started, let's open in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that you've given us. We thank you for the opportunity to spend a few moments in your word, looking at it, learning from it, applying it to our lives. And we also thank you for the opportunity to meet together to pray. I pray that you would bless this time, help it to be an encouragement and a challenge to us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so Proverbs 31. If I said Proverbs 31, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Last day of the month, okay. Proverbs 31. If you're doing a proverb a day and it's the 31st, it's the last day. Okay, what else? There's something quite often equated with Proverbs 31. The excellent wife, right? The excellent wife, Proverbs 31, right? It's quite often what's talked about. So here I am. I could see why Pastor left this one for me. No, not at all. So here we are. We've gone through the book of Proverbs. If I am understanding correctly, this is going to be our last session in regards to Proverbs. We've covered a lot of ground in the book of Proverbs. We've discussed different things about wisdom. What does wisdom look like? We've discussed fear of the Lord. What does that look like? How do we understand what the fear of the Lord is? We've seen this comparison and contrast between the wise man and the foolish man. And we've also seen sometimes that wisdom gets personified as a woman, right? And we also see that the writer of Proverbs, Solomon, is writing to his son, right? As if he was speaking to his son. And as we get as we start the book of Proverbs, we see there seems to be there seems to be an order to Proverbs. Sometimes when you're reading through the book of Proverbs, it seems very, very hit and miss sometimes when you're, or not hit and miss, but very random, where you're reading something, then you read something else and say, how did that go together? Or you read the next verse and that doesn't quite seem to, it seems like the writer's changing direction a lot. But actually, overall, there seems to be an overall structure to the book. And actually, as we come to the end of the book of Proverbs, we've seen this comparison between wisdom and folly, and quite often they are personified as the woman, the wise woman, or wisdom, the woman, and the woman, folly. And we also see the foolish woman. We've seen the Proverbs 7 and the prostitute, and we see this comparison. And is it interesting as we come to the end of Proverbs, in Proverbs 31, we have this comparison and contrast, and we've had this comparison and contrast, and now we have these final instructions given. And what is a king to be like? How is a king to use his authority? And then what sort of wife should a husband be looking for? So it's kind of like this, almost this capstone on the end of the book of this comparison between wisdom and foolishness. And then it's kind of an interesting thing here at the end of the book of Proverbs. We have this woman who personifies a wise woman. As far as the background is, we're going to go ahead and read through all of Proverbs 31, and then we're going to look at potential background. Where did this proverb come from? And then instead of trying to dig apart everything here, we're going to look at some basic things that we can learn from it. So I'm going to go ahead and read, starting in verse 31. The words of King Lemuel, the oracle which his mother taught him. What, O my son, and what, O my son of my womb, and what, O son of my vows, do not give your strength to women. I am so sorry. Do not give your strength to women, or your ways to that which it destroys kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink, for they will drink and forget what is decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to him whose life is bitter. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his trouble no more. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of the unfortunate. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the afflicted and needy. An excellent wife who can find, for her worth is far above jewels. And the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She is like a merchant ship's. She brings food from afar. She rises also while it is still night and gives food to her household and portions to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. From her earnings she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She senses that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands grasp the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She makes coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies belts to the tradesmen. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and does not eat of the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her, her husband also, and he praises her, saying, Many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot that is addressed. We're going to start right at the beginning, verses 1 through 9. A mother, it seems as though the mother is speaking this entire Proverbs, speaking to her son. Background: who is King Lemuel? There's a few different ideas. It is not certain exactly who it is. We know that it was compiled with the Proverbs, wise sayings of Solomon. There is a few different ideas of who it might be. This may have been someone from a North Arabian tribe, having to do with some of the words that it could be. There's also consideration that it might have been King Hezekiah, or someone in relation to King Hezekiah. And then there is also the very good possibility that it may have been Solomon himself. And actually, him being instructed by his mother. And actually, Solomon, I did not remember this. Did you know that King Solomon had a different name? Write it down for personal study. 2 Samuel 12:25 actually says, and sent a message by Nathan the prophet, so he called his name Jedediah because of the Lord. This is the child that David had with Bathsheba after their first child died. So interesting, Solomon had a different name besides Solomon. Interesting. And so, but what about Lemuel? Could Lemuel have been a nickname that I call Adeline Addie. And so Solomon was called something else by his mom, maybe as a nickname. And so he is actually writing this as if it was when his mom gave him this information. Whether that's actually the case, that's all speculation. It's not clear, but it's here, it's in the Bible, and we can trust that this is what God wanted. So, first of all, we see a king. And the mother is using endearing terms towards her son. Son of my womb, son of my vows or my prayers. Do not give your strength to women or your ways to that which destroy kings. There's a warning here. Do not use the authority that you have for debauchery. If you think about it, a king was absolute, people could do. The king wanted something, the king said something, the king got it. The king was not to use his authority for his own personal fulfillment. He wasn't to use it for debauchery, excessive indulgence in sensual pleasures, whether that be through sex with
women or drunkenness with alcohol. There's a warning against both. And we've seen warnings throughout Proverbs of being careful what you use your time for. Be careful about who you spend time with. Be careful of who your companions are. Be careful, fear the Lord. So there's this warning about using your authority to basically fulfill your own desires. I am a husband, I have a wife and 2 kids. I am supposed to be the leader of my home. That means God has given me authority to lead my home. Now, do I use that authority so I can boss my family around to get what I want, or to make sure so I live the good life? Well, that's not the point, right? There's application here. What is your authority being used for? There is a warning of using your authority for your own sake. But then also we see here, I'm just going to address it. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to him whose life is bitter. Let him drink and forget his poverty. And this is not saying that the king should give opiate to the masses, of just numbing the vassals so that they obey or submit. This is not even necessarily condoning that is what should happen. At the same time, I know that I sometimes have, when I worked in EMS, I worked as a paramedic. Guess what I gave people quite frequently? I gave people drugs to help them with the pain that they were currently experiencing. Much more effective and much safer drugs than alcohol when used appropriately. So there is something to be said. If someone is injured and not doing well, there is a time when you may help them with what they're experiencing. We do that in the medical field. I wouldn't want to have open heart surgery without anesthesia. That just doesn't sound pleasant at all. So there is a place for medicating those who are hurting. At the same time, this is not something where, oh, my life is so hard, I'm going to drink myself into oblivion. That's not what is being encouraged here. But why is the king being encouraged and warned to stay away from alcohol? Well, verse 4, it is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink, for they will drink and forget what is decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. So not only are they using their authority to fulfill their own desires, they're actually trampling over and not protecting those that they have been charged with protecting. Verse 8 and 9, open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of the unfortunate. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the afflicted and needy. Do not use your authority for your own pleasures. You are to use your authority for the benefit of those you are taking care of. So this is a mother writing to her son, who is a king or going to be a king, but yet the principles apply far beyond that. The authority of the presidency or Congress or law enforcement or parents. It is not so that you can have your own desires and needs and whatever met. It is so that you can bless those with whom you have been charged with. So for me, it's my wife and my kids. Yeah. So how do you use the authority that God has given you? We're going to now move. There could be way more said. I don't want to take forever. There's a lot going on now as regards to the excellent wife. Verses 10 through 31. We are not going to try to accomplish looking through all of this, but I am going to give you a couple things to think about. I lost my paper. A few things to think about. It's actually an acrostic. That means it uses the letter, each phrasing uses a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's like going through. So if we were using our alphabet, start with A, it is amazing, starts with B, is beyond compare, whatever you want to do. But this is, I'm using the Hebrew alphabet, and it's an acrostic. But it's also doing something else, and something where I was looking and you kind of almost see it. But then actually, I was doing some reading, and there it is. It is what is called a chiastic structure. chiastic. Yeah, chiastic structure, which has this idea where it starts here, and it kind of does like this, where it goes like this, and then it goes back out. So it kind of starts where it began, where it kind of, the main point is in the middle, and on either side you almost have a replication on either side. So to give you an idea, if you look at verse 10, all right, an excellent wife who can find, for her worth is far above jewels. But then if you look at 30 and 31, all right, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. There's a high value of a good wife. And you can see that kind of on both sides. Now, verses 11 and 12, the husband is benefited by the wife. And in verses 28 and 29, the husband and the children praise the wife. Verses 13 through 19, the wife works hard. Verse 27, the wife works hard. So it's kind of, you can see how it's kind of mirrored on either side. And in the middle, we have verse 23, which is not about the wife at all. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Well, I thought this was about the wife. Why is the center of the chiastic structure actually in regards to her husband? It's interestingly, a wife can either destroy her husband or can make him be able to be very successful. Kind of interesting. Now, this was written by a man who was recounting what his mom wrote to him.
So sometimes this passage is used to show young ladies or show ladies this is what a wife looks like, but actually its initial intention was for a man to know what to look for in a wife. That doesn't mean that it can't be used both ways, but it's just interesting that's how it was written. So there's a lot going on as far as working with their hands, doing flax. As far as I know, not many people in the U.S. make their own yarn and make their own clothes anymore. So there has to be some other principles that we can learn in regards to what's going on here. So some things to look at. Basic components of an excellent wife. She's industrious, compassionate, takes care of the needs of her family, is prepared for the future, shows wisdom in her speech. She is a good teacher, dedicated to her family, and shows biblical wisdom. It could be easy to look at this, and I know that if I was a woman and looking at it going, how am I ever going to match up to this? If you have any questions, see Janice, she's got the answers. Obviously, we are all in different stages and in different places in our sanctification, are we not? And there are plenty of other places. You look through the book of Proverbs. This is not just picking on women. This isn't saying this is only women have responsibilities. No, both men and women. In many other places, the writer of Proverbs says, fear the Lord. He's talking to his son. And it's interesting, one of the keystones of an excellent wife is a wife who fears the Lord. Verse 30. She loves God. She has a reverence for God. And that's a really good place to start. We're almost out of time as far as this, and then I want to make sure we have plenty of time to pray. But it's interesting, at the end of the book of Proverbs, we have kind of like this wise woman embodied. What this looks like: they're industrious, they're compassionate, they complete tasks that they start, they are wise in their speech, and they care about their families and those around them. It's interesting, we have in the first part of 31 how a king is to use his authority. The second part, we have the embodiment of what a wise woman looks like. And all through the book of Proverbs, there is this reoccurring theme of seeking after and gaining wisdom. Listening to, having the fear of the Lord, heeding the instruction of parents, and then there's an added blessing of an excellent wife. And an excellent wife fears the Lord as well. There's a lot there, and we could spend a lot more time on it. But just as an encouragement, really, how are we living that shows wisdom, fear of the Lord? Fear of the Lord kind of is the beginning of wisdom, right? And the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And here at the end of the book of Proverbs, we have kind of how this ends up looking, or what it should look like. All right. Any questions or comments? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, in addition to that, I wasn't going to go into it, but a few things to look at. Her husband trusts her, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and you will have no lack of gain. Part of the reason why the husband was able to be successful in business and being able to be seen in the councils of the city gates was where business occurred. That's where decisions were made. That's where things took place. Part of the reason why he did that is he didn't have to worry what was going on at home. His wife was managing things well. And it also doesn't mean that she isn't business smart either, because if you look, she considers a field and buys it. There's a lot more going on here than what at first appears. Her husband trusts her. She's making business decisions. Now, she's still managing the home, but she's actually, she stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands grasp the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor and stretches out her hand to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. That actually could also mean double thickness. So warmer clothes. All right. For her household is clothed with scarlet, she makes covering for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates. But then if you go to verse 24, she makes linen garments and sells them. She's been industrious enough that she actually is able to sell some of what she has. Strength and dignity are her clothing. And hold on, I've got to find... Hold on. From her earnings, she plants a vineyard. Well, she was gaining money. In verse 16, she considers a field and buys it. From her earnings, she plants a vineyard. And, I'm looking right at it probably. But basically, she's business savvy as well. This is not, she's just at home. She's barefoot, pregnant, the whole barefoot and pregnant thing. Staying home with the kids, just sitting there slaving over a stove. She's industrious. She is working. She's making decisions. In verse 15 is actually she's overseeing the maidens that very well could be the household servants. So she's making sure that their needs are being taken care of, and she's making sure that they have tasks to do. She is actually managing much more than just her kids. It's interesting. Yeah. And Proverbs 19:14, house and wealth are inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. There's a reminder that a wise and prudent wife comes from God. It's God's gift to the husband. And the husband is a gift to the wife too. It's not stated, but that is also the case. Any other thoughts or comments? All right, let's go ahead and close down. And do we have